Hello, BookTube, and welcome to the final installment of our read-along of Anthony Trollope's 1867 novel, The Claverings, as part of our year of consorting with lonely Trollopes, reading the Trollopes that aren't part of either of his two beloved multi-book series. And this is the story of a jilt. It's the story of a jilt, because Harry Clavering, who is the son of the uncle of the heir to Clavering Park and whatnot. The heir is a baronet named Sir Hugh, an odious man. Young Harry is going to go into a profession. Doesn't have a cushy living in front of him, so he's going to go into a profession of engineering and earn his keep. And he is in love with Julia Brabazon, who makes a decision to jilt him, to spurn his love, in order to marry a debauched nobleman, Lord Ongar, who is wealthy. She makes the decision with her eyes wide open that it's this or she lives on nothing. And so she marries Lord Ongar. And what he is, we gather from Trollope's elliptical descriptions, he is an alcoholic. It's also, as I've mentioned a couple of times before, characters like this in Trollope who are killing themselves with drink, there's often a strong implication of some sort of syphilitic element as well. Something else is killing them in addition to the alcohol. But one way or another, as bad as Julia thinks being Lady Ongar will be, it turns out to be much, much worse. Because when her husband is in his final violent years, he turns on her and tries to blacken her name by associating it with a seedy foreigner who he puts forward as someone with a claimant on her name. It doesn't work. Her behavior is above reproach. She nurses her husband to the end, and when he dies, she becomes Lady Ongar. She takes control of Ongar Park for life, or Ongar Castle for life, a very lovely landed estate that is hers for life, plus the income, plus a financial settlement. And this meets resistance from Lord Ongar's family at first. They don't like it, naturally, that she swooped in out of nowhere and that she gets this property that should go to the family heir. But she keeps it anyway. She goes there once and doesn't like it. She spends most of her time in London. And when Lord Ongar's death happens in Italy, and she wants to come back to England right away. There's nothing for her in Italy except Count Pateroff, the foreigner that her husband was trying to pair her off with. She doesn't feel safe or seemly to stay now that her husband is dead, so she wants to come back to England right away. Unfortunately, her sister's husband, Sir Hugh, doesn't want anything to do with her. Thinks just stay in Italy. Just have her stay in Italy until the whole furor of the whole subject blows over. Wait a season or two and then come back to England. She doesn't want to do that, and he won't have anything to do with her. So when she comes to London, she is effectively alone. He's her most prominent male relative, and he won't defend her name before the world. He won't go to meet her. He won't invite her back to Clavering Park, to his own house, under his own roof. He won't do any of that, which, in her opinion, accuses her in the eyes of the world. But she's not entirely abandoned because Mrs. Clavering thinks, well, someone has to go. Someone from the family has to put an olive branch out here. We can't just leave her to the wolves. And she asks Harry to go, despite the fact that they have a complicated relationship. In her own defense, she figures, well, the complicated relationship doesn't really matter because when Harry Clavering goes into the profession, he apprentices himself in an engineering firm and sort of diffidently falls in love with the daughter of one of the firm's leaders, with Florence Burton. And so Mrs. Clavering thinks, well, he's basically a married man, so it's safe to send him. She's in mourning, and he's basically a married man. But the emotions aren't settled between Julia and Harry at all. And that is the bulk of this book, is the whole long waltz between the two of them. Does he tell her that he's engaged to be married? Does she know and not care? Could he be advanced enormously with her property and money? And could she feel, by advancing him that property and money, that she was maybe redeeming herself from how horribly she treated him in the first place? And so on and so forth. And while we get that, we also get a few other plot lines. One of them involving Sir Hugh, who has fathered a little baby heir on his wife, his long-suffering wife Hermione. And the baby dies. We saw that last time. The little baby dies and leaves Hermione absolutely desolate, and underscores the inhumanity of her husband. He really doesn't want to comfort her. He endures it for a few seconds, but he doesn't really want to comfort her, and he doesn't really want anything to do with her when that's over. She's utterly distraught and miserable, of course, and she has nowhere to go. She is totally oppressed by him. He's a tyrant of a husband. She's not free to come and go as she pleases. So she's stuck in the house, a house which he hates. He would like to be elsewhere at all times than upkeeping the house and doing all of the balderdash landed gentry stuff that he can't stand. He really can't stand much of anything. He's an intensely self-centered person. And at one point, having calmed down just a bit, the family of Lord Ongar approaches him to approach Lady Ongar with an offer to buy her interest in the estate, to bring it back into the family for the heir. And using that as a pretext, Sir Hugh visits Julia in the chapters that we're reading today. To finish out, Sir Hugh visits Julia in London, and they have a fantastic scene. I wanted to read a bit of it to you because it's Trollope at his best, really. Sir Hugh brings up the whole thing about the family wanting to make an arrangement on the property, and she puts him off completely. Says, I don't care one way or another, but surely the lawyers should handle this, so why don't you just have them bring it up with my lawyer, or you bring it up with my lawyer? I don't want to talk about it. And that brings him on to once he's done with that, he raises the subject of his wife. Let's see here. So after a little while, he began about Hermione. As the world had determined upon acquitting Lady Ongar, it would be convenient to him that the two sisters should again be intimate, especially as Julia was a rich woman. His wife did not like Clavering Park, and he certainly did not like Clavering Park himself. If he could once get the house shut up, he might manage to keep it shut up for some years to come. His wife was now no more than a burden to him, and it would suit him well to put off the burden on his sister-in-law's shoulders. It was not that he intended to have his wife altogether dependent on another person, but he thought that if the two were established together in the first instance merely as a summer arrangement, such establishment might be made to assume some permanence. That would be very pleasant to him. Of course, he would pay a portion of the expense, as small a portion as might be possible. This is his wife we're talking about. But such a portion might enable him to live with credit before the world. And so he opens the subject with her. I wish I could think that you and Hermie might be together while I am absent. He plans to leave the continent, or leave the country. He said, I shall be very happy to have her. She will come to me, Julia replied. What, here in London? I'm not quite sure that she wishes to come up to London at present. I have never understood that she had any objection to being in town, said Lady Ongar. Well, not formerly, certainly, but now, since her boy's death, why should his death make more difference to her than to you? To this question Sir Hugh made no reply. If you were thinking of society, surely she could nowhere be safer than in such necessity with me. I never go out anywhere. I never dined out or even spent an evening in company since Lord Ongar's death, and no one would come here to disturb her. I didn't mean that. I don't quite know what you did mean. From different causes, she and I are left pretty much nearly equally without friends. Hermione is not left without friends, said Sir Hugh with a tone of offense. Were she not, she would not want to come to me. Your society is in London, to which she does not come, or in other country houses than your own, to which she is not taken. She lives altogether at Clavering, and there is no one there except your uncle, the rector, Harry's father. Whatever neighborhood there is she has, just like other women. Just like some other women, no doubt. I shall remain in town for another month, and after that I shall go somewhere. I don't much care where. If Hermie will come to me as my guest, I shall be happy to have her, and the longer she will stay with me, the better. Your coming home need make no difference, I suppose. In other words, she's telling him directly that, yes, you're leaving for now, but even when you come back, she doesn't have to hurry home to you. There was a keenness of reproach in her tone as she spoke, which even he could not but feel and acknowledge. He was very thick-skinned to some reproaches, and would have left this unnoticed had it been possible. Had she continued speaking, he would have done so, but she remained silent and sat looking at him, saying with her eyes the same thing she had already spoken with her words. Thus he was driven to speak. "I don't know," he said, "whether you intend that for a sneer." She was perfectly indifferent whether or not she offended him. Only that she believed that the maintenance of her own dignity forbade it, she would have openly rebuked him and told him that he was not welcome in her house. No treatment from her could, as she thought, be worse than he had deserved from her. His first enmity had injured her, and she could afford to laugh at his present anger. "It is hard to talk to you about Hermie without what you are pleased to call a sneer. You simply wish to be rid of her." "I wish no such thing, and you have no right to say so," says Sir Hugh, when Trollope has just told us that's exactly what he wishes. That's exactly what he wants. She knows him perfectly, but he objects to it. I wish no such thing, and you have no right to say so. At any rate, you are ridding yourself of her society, and if under those circumstances she likes to come to me, I shall be glad to receive her. Our life together will not be very cheerful, but neither she nor I ought to expect a cheerful life." He rose from his chair now, with a cloud of anger upon his brow. "I can see how it is," he said. "Because everything has not gone smooth with you yourself, you choose to resent it upon me. I might have expected that you would not have forgotten in whose house you met Lord Ongar." He's so clueless that he thinks that he's gaining a point on her to remind her that she wouldn't be a wealthy woman if it weren't for him, overlooking what would be obvious to anyone else, which is that it's brought her only misery. "No, Hugh, I forget nothing. Neither when I met him, nor how I married him, nor any of the events that have happened since. My memory, unfortunately, is very good. I did all I could for you, and should have been safe from your insolence. You should have continued to stay away from me, and you would have been quite safe. But our quarreling in this way is foolish. We can never be friends, you and I, but we need not be open enemies. Your wife is my sister, and I say again that if she likes to come to me, I shall be delighted to have her. My wife," said he, "will go to the house of no person who is insolent to me." So his own plan is thwarted by his own temper, and he storms off. And two things develop from there. You can see, even in that interview, that Lady Ongar is not happy with her life at all. And the more she thinks about it, once she realizes that Florence Burton is going to marry Harry Clavering, so her wealth and property cannot possibly help him. He is going elsewhere. He is that has gone on. We are quits now, she says. Once she realizes that, she also realizes that she wants nothing to do with anything that came of her marriage to Lord Ongar. It was a horrible, horrible thing. It blighted her life. Had she been faithful to Harry and not thought about money, she would have been happier. And in the course of the rest of the pages that we're reading, she makes overtures to divest herself of all of that, to hand the property back to the family, to hand the bulk of the money back to the family, keeping only enough so that, as she puts it, she's not an embarrassment to the family. But other than that, nothing. No proceeds from Lord Ongar, and therefore no reminders of what she had to do to get that money at all. But another thing happens when Sir Hugh storms off, and it's an odd thing. It's a thing that I don't know what the rest of you will think. By now, a lot of you are veteran Trollope readers. To me, it's very dramatic, so it's very enjoyable to read. To me, it causes just a little burp of disappointment, because Sir Hugh is awful. He's a monster. He doesn't mourn his little baby heir. He doesn't comfort his wife in the moment of her grief. He doesn't want her around him afterwards. Her purpose was to give him an heir. That's not going to happen. So he wants to fob her off, even on someone he doesn't like. And he treats his brother Archie as a pet, and not a particularly liked pet either. He's a brutal, brusque, callous man. And at the end of this book, in a plot development that I always find a little bit disappointing, Trollope decides to just be rid of him. To just be rid of him, and to be rid of his brother along with him. Trollope smooths out Harry's financial prospects with a plot device that's as old as Abel and Cain, and that comes out of nowhere. I won't go into explicit in case any of you haven't got to the ending here, but I wonder if you'll be disappointed too. it to me, what I'm always reminded of is another book that we read in our Trollope read-alongs, The Prime Minister, in which there is a scurrilous and black-hearted interloper into high society, Ferdinand Lopez, who is a speculator. He's a financial speculator, and has lots of reverses. He is definitely the villain of the piece. He has lots of reverses, and during in the wake of one of the more catastrophic reverses that he has, decides abruptly to kill himself, and does. And many commentators have pointed out that not only did he not need to do that, that recovery was possible, even from the setbacks that he had experienced, but also that the Ferdinand Lopez character that we met in the course of the book would not have done that. It just seems like Trollope got to page 750 and thought, well, I need to be rid of this guy. I don't have any plans for him. I don't know anything more to do with him. So off he goes. And something of that seems to cloud the ending of this book. Trollope tries his best to concentrate in the long twilight falling periods of his endings on the happy bits. Not only Florence Burton, but also Fanny Clavering, who is disposed to marry, whether she realizes it or not, a penniless sub-curate who only needs an income. He only needs a place in order to be a respectable husband for her. There are a couple of plot lines that Trollope seems to like solving, that he seems to like putting to bed. Also, Sophie Gordeloup, is the lecherous sister of Count Pateroff, has to be gotten out of the plot at some point or other, and it's suitably well done. you want her to get her comeuppance, and she kind of sort of does. All of that is handled with the usual smooth Trollopian skill. It's just the Sir Hugh plotline that I wonder about. I wonder what you'll think of. Whether or not I mean, I don't have any doubt that on some level it will satisfy you, but on another level I wonder if it won't, and I'm curious to know now that we're done. Now that we're done with the Claverings, I'm curious to know what you make of it. And now that we're done with the Claverings, the most natural thing in the world would be to announce the next Trollope read-along. But I'm going to break with tradition for the month of July. We're not going to do a Trollope read-along in July. There is a read-along going on. I want to devote my whole attention to it, and it's this. It's Boswell's Life of Johnson, which I'm doing with Matthew of Maybury Book Club, who has enormous cats and a tiny house. We're going to do a read-along of this enormous book, and I think it's fantastic. I absolutely love it, and I want to recommend it to all of you who maybe were wondering which big Trollope novel we were going to read next, because a lot of you, I know from emails, never expected that you would come to love Trollope, except through these read-alongs. You gave these read-alongs a try, and you have come to love Trollope, but you didn't expect that would be true. He seemed like just a gray, boring Victorian author of triple-deckers, not anyone who was alive. And you have learned otherwise. Those of you who have gone through that process have learned otherwise. And I love reading those emails. Absolutely love reading them. And I have a feeling that this would be the same thing. This is also a very much living text that maybe might have put you off because it's so big, and because it's biography, and because Dr. Johnson isn't as well known anymore as he once was. So I'm going to urge, I'm going to do only one read-along in the month of July, and it's going to be this. So I urge you to give it a try. It's available on Project Gutenberg for free. It's a great big book, but there are many editions that are out there. We're going to do the unabridged, so we're going to do 250 pages a week starting next weekend. So I'm going to urge you to do that. We're going to take July off from Trollope. We will return to Trollope in August. So I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.